Hello, I'm Tom Check with the One World, One Water Center, and we're going to talk about Colorado water history. So, I'm with the One World, One Water Center here at Metropolitan State University of Denver, beautiful campus, and the history of this campus relates to what we're going to talk about in the future. And real brief, we have a water studies minor that you may be part of, and if you're not, you might want to look into it. It's a 18 credit minor, and it could help you with your future endeavors. Okay, let's start with some water history. So the history of water in Colorado really goes back to ancient times, even to biblical times. But we're going to start with the Code of Hammurabi, which is found in the Louvre in Paris. And it's a stone about 7 feet tall, about this big around, and it has all the ancient laws of Mesopotamia from King Hammurabi. One of the laws that's written on this stele, S-T-E-L-E, this stone, is a law about water use, that if you flood your neighbor's field, you have to repay them in some grain because you have to be careful with and wise with how you use your water resources. And then first possession. This is an interesting thing that we use today, and it goes back to ancient times also, and that is people who are first in line or the first to get someplace feel they have a special right to use of something that they're the first one to get to. And that's sometimes called first in time, first in right. It's the doctrine of prior appropriation in Colorado. We'll talk about that in a bit. But first possession is just kind of a human nature trait of finders keepers or first in time, first in right. And that's not much different than if you're out on the prairie or in the West, and this is a painting from a museum in Houston, Texas, where people are fighting about a water hole for their livestock, and these guys with the guns were there first, and they're going to protect it. First possession. So first possession goes way back again thousands of years ago, not only in Colorado with mining interests here, but also to tin mining in Wales in the United Kingdom. This goes back thousands of years. Tin was found very similarly to gold mines here in Colorado, in that tin was found in the rivers and streams of Wales, and people would mine that because it was an important component of making bronze, ancient armor and weapons of war. So the tin mines back in Wales were similar to in Colorado in more recent times, in that tin courts, stannary courts were curated to settle disputes between the mining of tin. Water was an important component because you had to separate the sand and gravel from the tin in order to gather it and to make it more useful. So tin mining is a big thing that relates to Colorado gold mining we'll talk about in a second. And here we are, Colorado, 1859. Gold was found west of Denver, up in the mountains, and originally it was found in the streams through the Denver area. So if you're on Clear Creek or near Confluence Park, where the REI store is today, or if you were on near Dartmouth and Santa Fe, some small streams there, gold was found in the 1850s, and then in the 1860s, about 100,000 gold miners came to Colorado to strike it rich. They went up in the mountains, like this photo here, and they had to figure out laws or methods to keep people from killing one another about the water. The way it would work is a miner would come along in 1859, perhaps from Iowa. They would decide that they're going to mine this certain area near a stream, and so they would dig a ditch to their placer mine. And a placer mine is a location where they put 4 stakes in the ground. That's where they were going to dig and mine for the gold. But they had to have water to separate the sand and gravel from the gold nuggets or gold flecks. So what would again, 1859, the prospector would come from Iowa, would mine for gold. Quite often, some would come along a few days later and dig a new ditch from that same stream upstream and take all the water from the first miner. So the second miner that came along had plenty of water to do what they wanted to do with their mine, but the first miner lost their water. So how would you manage water? 1859 in Colorado, that first person who had their water stolen from them would probably go upstream, have a fight, might involve guns. They would then fill in the second ditch to get water to where the first person was, first possession, first in time, first in right. It's how water was managed in 1859 We do it the same way today in Colorado, except now we use water attorneys and water engineers instead of gunfights. So irrigation systems were constructed between 1860 and 1890 along the South Platte River Basin, similar decades around the state of Colorado. Irrigation canals were constructed to irrigate land because a lot of gold miners figured out quickly they could make more money by growing crops and feeding the miners. Some call that mining the miners, instead of trying to look for gold up in the mountains, which is really hit and miss. So a lot of irrigation canals were constructed from 1860 to 1890, and they would have a water right. So here on the photo, these characters that are digging a ditch probably near Greeley, Colorado, their water right was May 2nd, 1863 for 75 cubic feet per second of water from a stream. What that means, a cubic foot per second is about the size of a box that a basketball would fit in. So if you had that volume of water going by this spot every second, that's 1 cubic foot per second. If you had 75 cubic feet per second, that'd be 75 boxes the size of that a basketball would fit in full of water, past this spot every second. That'd be 75 cubic feet per second, or 75 CFS. Now this video, I hope you can get it to work. Sometimes it'll work on a browser, sometimes it don't. But this is an old television show called Bonanza, where they're in Nevada in the 1890s and they're ranching. And in this particular episode, it lasts about 2 minutes. They're fighting about water rights on the Ponderosa, the ranch. And so the Cartwright family rides up and they run into a neighbor that's going to turn their stream into a mine, like for gold mining or gravel mining or something like that. And there's a big fight. They talk about water rights. So that's what this is. So that idea of diverting water, remember the slide a couple slides back, 1860, 1862, they get a water right for 75 CFS. Many, many irrigation canals were constructed like that along the South Platte River, 1860 to 1890. Here's one. This is actually the Lupton Bottoms ditch, I believe, near Fort Lupton. And they have a water right from 1861. So these are very old water rights. And you probably have, these people probably have water during the dry summer months of July and August. So that water rights, that first in time, first in right, first possession, it's exactly the same thing as Bronco season tickets. So let's suppose you bought one of the first season tickets for the Denver Broncos when they played their first season, which I think was 1961 or 62. And let's say you kept those season tickets today in the new stadium. Where would you sit? You'd be like 50-yard line, you'd be that lower deck, you'd have great seats, and that's like you're the #1 priority for Bronco season tickets. My wife Grace and I, when we moved to Colorado in the 80s, we wrote the Denver Broncos and we said, we'd like to buy 2 season tickets. Would you please send them to us, please? They wrote back about a month later and said, you know, there's 12,681 people ahead of you that want season tickets. You have to wait your turn. We had to wait 10 years. It was like 1992. And then we got 2 tickets in the mail for the Denver Broncos, 2 season tickets. But where did we sit in the old stadium? We were like north end zone, top row. We were nosebleed. You could stand up and turn around and see Thornton from up there. But we had tickets inside the stadium. So from 1961 to 1980, more demand than supply, just like the water rights on the South Platte River. 1861 is one of the earliest water rights in the South Platte. If you got an 1890 water right in July and August, it's pretty worthless because there's so many people ahead of you, just like the Bronco season tickets. Now, one thing about the Bronco season tickets, when you have a season ticket, do you own the right to unbolt the seat and take it home with you during the week? No. You have the right to sit in it on Sunday. That's called a usufructuary right, a right of use. And water rights are the same way. You have the right to divert the water and use it, but you don't have the right to pollute it, and the state of Colorado can put restrictions on when you use the water and how, so you have a right to use the water. Usufructuary right. Now, irrigation ditches, we just talked about first in time, first in right, to divert water into irrigation canals or ditches in Colorado. Well, once the water gets into the canal, how's the water distributed between the different farmers or irrigators? Well, there it's a different thing. It's not a priority system. Once the water gets inside the canal, Once the water's diverted from a river into a canal, then the water's divided by a ditch rider based on the number of shares you own in the ditch company. So for example, let's say there's 100 shareholders in this particular ditch and it's located near Brighton, Colorado. And let's say you own 1 share out of 100. That means you'll get 1% of the water on any particular day during the growing season. So if the ditch is full, you'll get 1% of the water in a full ditch. If it's half full, you'll get 1% of the water in a half full ditch. If the ditch is dry, you get 1% of nothing. Now suppose you go to your neighbor and you say, hey, I want to buy more shares of water. I know you're ready to stop farming. I'll give you some money. I want to now buy your share, and I own now 2 shares. So then you'll get 2% of the water in the ditch at any particular time. Now cities in Colorado quite often will try to buy 51% of the shares in a ditch, because then they have more control over how the ditch is operated. So the diversion or the distribution of water in an irrigation canal, like here, is determined on the number of shares of water you own in that ditch company. Each ditch company has a wildly different number of shares. There's one ditch company, they have 24 shares, and they divvy it up that way. And you may own a quarter share, and that's a lot of water. Other ditch companies may have 3,461 shares, and you might own 200 shares. So if you ever get involved in trying to buy ditch water stop, or you're looking into that, first question is how many total shares are in the ditch company. And the person that distributes the water within an irrigation canal, irrigation ditch, is called a ditch rider. Now in southern Colorado, the acequia ditch systems are different. This is the San Luis Peoples Ditch near San Luis, Colorado. It has a water right of 1852. So just like all the other water rights in the state, when 1852 is in priority, which is the oldest water right in the state, the folks around San Luis can divert water from the nearby stream. Once the water gets into the ditch or the canal, then the distribution is totally different. Then it's based on greatest need, not by the number of shares you own. So for example, let's say you irrigate under the San Luis Peoples Ditch, and you are growing corn, and it's tasseling, it's June, and you need water for that corn. The mayor domo, that's the ditch rider, will probably give the water to you that day because you need it for the tasseling corn. Especially if your neighbor is growing alfalfa. Alfalfa can get by without water for a while, and maybe they just have 1 horse. They have some hay left over from last year. The mayor domo will give it to you with a corn ahead of the person with the alfalfa. A few years back, I was in San Luis, and I asked the mayor domo, I got him off to a side. I said, now tell me how this really works. Do you go, if it's the mayor of the town, do you give them a little extra water? If it's a relative, would you give them extra water if they asked? He said, no, because I would be fired that day, because it has to be based on greatest need. That's how we survive through the cold and long winters here in southern Colorado. You can't play favorites. And I told him, man, if we tried doing that in northern Colorado, there'd be uproar and chaos, and water attorneys would get involved. It'd be nuts. So the way the community comes together in San Luis on these acequias is a remarkable historical thing worth looking into further when you have time. You Google acequias, San Luis, and water rights, water distribution. It's an interesting topic. And one other thing the folks in San Luis do is they get together every spring to clean the irrigation canal as a community. They'll get together, they all have to partake in cleaning the ditch, or they won't get water delivered that coming year. And when they do this, when they're done, then they have a nice lunch, they have a potluck, and it's a really interesting thing. Not unlike in Egypt, thousands of years ago, when the king would decide, the king of Egypt would decide, okay, we're going to start running water, it's July, and the king was in charge of distributing the water, and it was a community event and so forth, but I don't think they had a potluck dinner afterwards. Okay, we're kind of winding down. In Colorado, we have a water court system. I'll show you in a second. When I came to Colorado in the 1980s, I thought, man, Colorado is so smart. They came up with the idea of a water court to settle arguments, water engineers and water attorneys. Well, if you Google it and you look up water court to Valencia, Spain, they've been doing this in Valencia since the year 961. Every Thursday at 11, they get together. They'll elect 7 irrigators. They'll put on black robes. They meet in the doorway of the cathedral. and they'll hear water disputes in that dry area of Spain. Valencia oranges, a lot of fruit trees and so forth. So every Thursday they get together, they'll hear arguments about water distribution, and at noon they stop. It's a 1-hour event. No paper, no attorneys, no engineers, and then at noon they stop and they have lunch, which is a wonderful way to settle arguments about water. Now in Colorado, same thing. Started this in 1969. Here we have water engineers, water attorneys. Years ago, there's no jury. You just sit on the witness stand and they ask you questions. Years ago, I got to sit in that witness stand chair for 4 days. It was a big water case about surface water and groundwater. Absolutely no fun. But someday, if you have time, Google Colorado Water Court and just kind of read a bit about it. It's a fascinating place when there are water disputes. And it prevents people from trying to kill one another. I've not heard of anyone nearly getting killed fighting about water in Colorado since 2008. So that's progress. That was a fight around Greeley. Okay, so one thing to think about as you study Colorado water history, and that is that our population is growing, as you all know. All you got to do is drive down I-25 or look at the construction cranes in downtown Denver. A lot of people moving here. And it's really important that our water providers come up with more water to take care of these people that are moving here. The place where the water is probably going to come from is from irrigated agriculture. The land will be dried up. Water will be put in a pipeline and pumped back to the Denver metro area. It's already happening. Aurora is doing this. Thornton is doing this. Parker Water and Sanitation is doing this. It's where our water is going to come from for the millions of people moving here will be from water that was previously used for irrigated agriculture. Conservation is not enough. It helps, but water conservation will only provide part of the water necessary for the new people moving here. Our biggest challenges, you all know these, population growth. It's just what's happening. Think about all of yourself or your friends or family that you live with here in Colorado. How many of them grew up in Colorado? By and large, most people have moved here from somewhere else. It's a wonderful place to live. So population growth is an issue that we have to deal with in terms of water resources. Next thing is the loss of irrigated agriculture. We mentioned earlier that as people move here, the water supply that they need is probably going to come from irrigated lands. And so what do we do with that land after the water is removed? It's going to turn back to sagebrush, prickly pear cactus. You're going to have dust issues. How do you revegetate that land? What do you do about the environmental loss for wildlife habitat and so forth? Those are big issues that are kind of controversies. Problem with trying to manage that loss of irrigated land is that water and land are private property rights, and if an irrigator wants to sell their land and their water, they're entitled to do it to a city. And if a city offers enough money, it's pretty tough to turn that down if you're of retirement age. So that idea of protecting the environment through that loss of irrigated land is a big issue. And then finally, most of us move to Colorado because we love the environment, the outdoors. How do we manage our water resources with 1 million people moving to Colorado in the next few decades and not mess up our streams on the west slope and the Front Range and cause pollution, and how do we protect the wildlife? Enormous challenge that we've got to figure out because we only have one gorgeous environment to protect, and if we keep whittling away at it with new people moving here, with more water diverted, with lower flows in our streams and lower water levels in our lakes, we're messing up the environment that we all moved here to enjoy. So that's a really important thing. Looking at history is always good to see where we've been in the past and to use that knowledge for planning for the future, but there's a lot of people moving here, and how do we deal with that? So that's it. Hope you're enjoying this class. This is really good that you're learning about Colorado water history. It's really important that you pay attention and work through this course and gain some more knowledge about Colorado water. Thank you.